Hey everybody, it's Dave here from Dragonhill Games, and this is a definitive guide to XYRIS the Writhing Storm. XYRIS the Writhing Storm is an awesome new commander from the Commander 2020 series, and he's in the Teamer colors. So for just 1 red, 1 blue, 1 green, and 2, we get a legendary creature, Snake Leviathan. He's a 3/5 flyer, and whenever an opponent draws a card, except for the first card that they draw in each of their draw steps, create a 1/1 green snake creature token. Whenever XYRIS the Writhing Storm deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. This video will be focusing specifically on cards that work extremely well with XYRIS the Writhing Storm. If you're interested in my deck list, you can find it in its entirety in the description of this video. XYRIS is a commander that benefits from our opponents drawing lots of cards. After all, if we wheel all of our opponents, we'll be creating 21 snakes. So let's wheel a lot. Of course, we have our traditional wheels, things like Wheel of Fortune and Reforge the Soul. But Teferi's Puzzle Box, Wheel and Deal, Time Spiral, Winds of Change, and Windfall should all be included in your deck as well. Burning Inquiry and Fascination are also very good at forcing draws on our opponents. I choose to avoid Wheel of Fate and Day's Undoing. With Wheel of Fate, there's no guarantee that XYRIS is going to be around when it goes off, and I really don't like the idea of ending my turn after a Day's Undoing. If at all possible, we want to be attacking with the snakes the turn we get them, and we can do that by having either a Concordant Crossroads or a Mass Hysteria in play. There are a few creatures that will also assist us with keeping our opponent's hands full, namely Jace's Archivist and Magus of the Wheel. Both of these provide additional wheel effects, while Kami of the Crescent Moon gives us some extra card draw support as well. There are also a few good artifacts that keep our opponents drawing additional cards. Things like Howling Mine and Font of Mythos work extremely well. Alright, so now that we have our opponents drawing all the cards, all the time, let's get into how we're going to punish them for having their hands full. I mean, they can hardly complain if we're giving them like 3 or 4 cards a turn, right? The obvious line would be to smash everyone's face in with all these snakes we've just made, but 1/1 snakes don't really seem all that threatening, so let's turn them all into monsters. Sashiro the Anointed is really solid, but there's lots of other great Anthem effects we can use as well. Vanquisher's Banner will buff our snakes and give us some additional card draw if we have to recast XYRIS. And Coat of Arms is off the charts. If we have a typical pod and we wheel, we'll create 21 snakes, which means that all of our snake tokens will get +21, +21, since we count XYRIS as a snake. And again, Mass Hysteria or Concordant Crossroads. If that's not enough for you, then throw in Doubling Season or Parallel Lives into the mix and things get really scary. Oh wait, and don't forget about this guy. And since we're going to be wheeling so much, then we may as well be benefiting from drawing so many cards. Enter the Locust God. This guy is perfect for this deck. For each card we draw, we get to create a 1/1 flying insect, and we'll be drawing a lot of cards, so we'll be making a lot of bugs. Niv-Mizzet the Firemind and Niv-Mizzet Perun are extremely punishing as well. Both of these guys let us deal 1 damage to any target whenever we draw a card, essentially acting like a machine gun whenever we wheel. Here, you guys line up against this wall. I'ma be right back. Another amazing include is Glinthorn Buccaneer. This guy deals 1 damage to each opponent whenever we discard a card, which we will also be doing a lot. Now, before we get into the really good stuff, let's talk lands. Now, our hand is going to be full most of the time, so being able to put extra lands into play seems like a pretty good plan. Sakura Tribe Scout lets us do just that, and she fits nicely into the snake theme. Dryad of the Elysian Grove also lets us play an additional land each turn without the restriction of having it come from our hand, so we can use this to take full advantage of Crucible of Worlds. And he provides color fixing as well. If you feel like being a real jerk, you can use Crucible of Worlds to keep recycling Wasteland and turn your opponent's boards into, well, wastelands. Burgeoning is also really sweet. Since your opponents will not likely be missing any land drops, we get to play lands on their turn too. And finally, Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath feels like a perfect fit for this deck. No matter how it ends up in the yard, we should be able to escape it pretty easily. And having a 6/6 speeder that gains us 3 life, draws a card, and allows us to put a land onto the battlefield is a pretty good deal. And while we're on the subject of lands, of course you'll be wanting to include a Reliquary Tower. But lands like Gyre Reach Sanitarium and Mikokoro Center of the Sea should also be strongly considered for your deck. Okay, so we've already established that we're going to be making a lot of snakes every turn. So let's look at how we can really take advantage with all these snakes that we're going to be getting. Impact Tremors is an enchantment that costs 1 red and 1, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under our control, Impact Tremors deals 1 damage to each opponent. So as you can imagine, when we wheel and create 20 plus snakes, it's going to be really, really punishing on our opponents. Now, since we're punishing our opponents with creatures on their way in, we may as well continue punishing our opponents with creatures on their way out. Goblin Bombardment is another enchantment that costs 1 red and 1, and we can sacrifice a creature, and Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to any creature or player. So as you can imagine, if we wheel and get 21 snakes and have Impact Tremors, we just dealt 21 damage to each opponent. Now we can sacrifice all the snakes to Goblin Bombardment and finish one opponent off completely. And of course, the granddaddy of them all is Perforos, God of the Forge. For 1 red and 3, we get a legendary god, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under our control, Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent. That's right, if we wheel, we're going to be doing 42 damage to each opponent. Good game. If by some miracle somebody survived this, we can use Perforos as an Anthem effect to give all of our snakes +1/+0 until end of turn. Of course, the success of this deck depends on XYRIS surviving, so you'll want to be including things like Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots to help protect him. Cards like Darksteel Plate and Whisper Silk Cloak are also excellent choices. Alright, last but not least, there's a couple of odds and end cards that fit really well into this deck. Prowling Serpopod is a snake, so of course that goes along with the theme, but it also has creature spells we control can't be countered. This can come up really clutch if we're trying to stick something like a Craterhoof Behemoth or a Perforos, God of the Forge, onto the battlefield. And Splendid Reclamation also slots really nicely into this deck. For just 1 green and 3 at sorcery speed, we get to return all land cards from our graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Pretty good considering we're going to be wheeling a lot of cards into our graveyard. Alright, and finally, I really struggled with whether or not to put Narset Parter of Veils in this deck. I mean, each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn, right? So obviously that's really counterproductive with XYRIS. I mean, we want our opponents to be drawing cards, so we're making a bunch of snakes. But I think there's going to be plenty of times where maybe we Psych Rift going into our turn, and then we drop Narset and wheel all of their stuff away. Or we just have a dominant board state and we can drop Narset, wheel, empty our opponent's hands essentially, and then just kind of win the game through attrition. So, like I said, I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities where Narset, Part of the Veils, will just win the game for us by not allowing our opponents to have a hand. Alright, so as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the entire deck list is in the description of this video. Now, if you're catching this in the first couple of weeks before this stuff becomes Commander legal, this new Commander 2020 stuff, it will say Omnath Locus of the Royal as the commander, and that's only because TCG will not allow me to use any cards that aren't currently Commander legal. So that'll be corrected after everything in this video becomes Commander legal. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and smash that like button. It really helps me out. What do you think should be included in the deck? What will you be including in your deck? Why don't you let me know in the comment section below? Bye for now.